I was 23 years old when it happened. I'm 27 now, and not a single week has passed without that trip haunting the corners of my mind. It was supposed to be a celebration. Our friend Andrew had just turned 21, and we wanted to give him something unforgettable. Vegas was the obvious choice. A city of lights, chaos, and excess. The perfect backdrop for what we had in mind. Andrew was always the quiet one in our group. Laid back, kind, and just a little too shy for his own good. We all knew he hadn't done the deed yet. So our plan, crude as it might sound, was simple. Get him completely drunk and, to put it bluntly, help him finally lose his virginity. We booked 2 rooms at the Carriage House Hotel. Not exactly glamorous, but it was cheap and close enough to the Strip. With 7 of us total, we split up. 4 in one room and the other 3 in the second. Andrew was with us. The very first thing we did, before the drinks, before the clubs, was eat. We were starving from the flight and the excitement, and nothing says start of a wild night like greasy food in a city that never sleeps.
Then came the casinos. None of us were big gamblers, but it felt like a rite of passage, something you had to do in Vegas. We threw chips on the table just for the thrill of it. Out of all 7 of us, only 1 left with more cash than he walked in with. The rest of us paid the Vegas tax. From there, we bounced between bars, tasting everything the city had to offer. As the hours slipped by, things began to blur. Faces melted into neon. Conversations became fragments of laughter. Every dumb joke hit like comedy gold. We were in the zone. Then we found a nightclub that was straight up unhinged. The kind where the bass shakes the floor and the strobe lights flash just a little too long between beats, disorienting you in the best kind of way. Bodies packed tight, drinks sloshing, sweat and perfume thick in the air. Somewhere in that chaos, we spotted John and Eddie leaving with 2 girls clinging to their arms. They turned back just long enough to flash us the classic "we're about to get lucky" smirk. We got the message, loud and clear. That left the rest of us, and our focus shifted to Andrew. He was tipsy, laughing more than usual, a little looser in the shoulders. It felt like now or never.
We tried everything, hyping him up, pointing out girls who seemed friendly, even dragging him toward the dance floor. But even in that drunken, half-liberated state, Andrew froze, shy to his core. He couldn't bring himself to walk up to anyone. He couldn't even sway to the beat. He just stood there, surrounded by lights, music, and temptation, completely out of place. Things had started feeling desperate. We could already see it. Andrew wasn't going to meet anyone. Not that night. Maybe not for the rest of the trip. At the rate things were going, he'd leave Vegas the same way he came in. Sober, shy, and still a virgin. So, in our drunken brilliance, we came up with what seemed, at the time, like a perfectly reasonable plan. We'd find someone for him. Someone professional. Look, I get it. Sounds weird now, maybe even messed up. But by then, we were fully blitzed. Reason and caution had long since drowned in vodka and cheap beer. Logic had no place in that moment. That's when we saw her. She was walking alone, casually, as if the night didn't touch her. We stumbled over like idiots, all clumsy steps and slurred words. One of us, maybe it was me, asked if she'd be interested in hanging out with our friend Andrew. We practically pointed at him like he was a prize behind a curtain. He stood there, swaying slightly, clearly not as far gone as the rest of us, but still buzzed enough to go along with it.
I remember looking at her face. Even through the haze, I could tell she wasn't anything special. Not ugly, just plain, unremarkable. And yet, something didn't sit quite right. There was a strange air about her, like she didn't belong in the mess of lights and noise around us. Her eyes lingered too long. Her movements were too smooth, unnaturally so. Her voice, when she finally spoke, made me flinch. It was deep, not comically so, just low enough that I instinctively turned to one of the guys with that quick, "Did you hear that too?" glance. She didn't say much, not that I remember. The words are a blur, but I clearly recall the way she looked at Andrew, slowly, deliberately, head to toe. Her eyes almost seemed to study him, like she was sizing him up for something, like a tailor taking silent measurements, or a predator deciding if the prey was worth the effort. Then, without warning, she reached out and grabbed Andrew's arm, lightly but firmly enough to lead. And just like that, the two of them started walking off down the sidewalk. We stood there, watching, the streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. Andrew looked stiff, shoulders tight, steps hesitant, the kind of awkward that made you wince from a distance.
We laughed. God, we laughed. It was so Andrew to be nervous, even in a situation like that. None of us thought twice about what had just happened. Not then. Not really. But curiosity has a way of sticking its hooks in you. We weren't ready to head back to the hotel just yet. We wanted to see how it played out, maybe even tease him afterward. So we did what drunk idiots do best. We followed them. At a distance, quiet, still joking, still buzzing, but somewhere inside, something small, something quiet, had started to twist, and we didn't notice. Not yet. They didn't seem to talk, not a word. From where we were trailing, it looked like she was leading him, no, pulling him. Her hand was still clasped around his arm, and he followed like a kid being dragged somewhere he didn't really want to go, but didn't know how to stop it either. We kept our distance, laughing quietly, cracking jokes, but something about the way they moved started to feel off. It wasn't playful. It wasn't flirtatious. It was cold, mechanical. We followed for maybe 15 minutes. Could have been longer. Time doesn't work right when you're drunk. Every minute feels stretched and compressed all at once. But it was long enough for us to drift from the lights and noise of the strip.
The streets grew quieter, dimmer, less foot traffic. The usual buzzing nightlife had faded behind us, replaced by the low hum of the occasional street lamp and the rhythmic scuff of our own feet on the pavement. Eventually, we watched as the two of them disappeared into what looked like an apartment building. No sign, no music, just a shadowed entrance swallowed in darkness. That was it. No second thought.
No dramatic pause. We laughed again, too loud for a street that quiet, and clapped each other on the back like we'd just pulled off something brilliant. Pride and drunken satisfaction swelled in our chests. Andrew, the shy guy, had finally done it. Or so we thought. There was no reason to hang around, so we peeled off and headed back toward the club. Time skipped forward. Around 2 in the morning, we made our way back to the hotel, tired, sweat-soaked, buzzing with leftover adrenaline. We poured into our 2 rooms, still chuckling about the night, still riding that high. That's when I noticed it. Andrew wasn't there. Not in our room. Not in the other one either. At first, no one seemed all that concerned. We tossed our jackets down, kicked off our shoes. But as I started to sober up, something in me shifted. A quiet unease began to creep in. It wasn't like Andrew to do something like this. Sure, he'd gone off with a girl, but spending the entire night without a single message? No check-in? No gloating? No nervous update? It didn't feel right. John and Eddie, who hadn't been with us earlier, were wide-eyed when we told them what happened. They didn't laugh. They didn't joke. They just blinked, confused. We all kind of assumed Andrew was still with the girl. That made the most sense. But even then, it felt weird, out of character. This wasn't him. I pulled out my phone and sent him a text, then another. Tried calling. No answer. Straight to voicemail. My chest tightened a little, that familiar itch of dread starting to take shape. But my friends waved it off, told me to chill, told me he was probably just busy, probably passed out, probably having the time of his life. But probably doesn't help when your gut's already whispering that something's wrong. I crashed just minutes later. Sleep took me quickly. Blurry images, echoes of music and laughter still bouncing around in my head. But it didn't last. I was pulled from it by a sound, ringing. For a moment, in that groggy space between dream and waking, I thought it was just an alarm. I fumbled around the nightstand, eyes half closed, blindly tapping at my phone to shut it off. But the sound didn't stop. That's when my brain began to catch up. It wasn't an alarm. It was a phone call, and it was Andrew's number. My heart plummeted in an instant, a sickening, weightless drop that made my stomach clench. Something was wrong. I felt it in my bones before I even touched the screen. My friends were already stirring, the ringing having jolted them awake too. I held up the phone so they could see. Andrew, 2:37 a.m. I swiped to answer. At first, there was just breathing. Heavy, uneven, ragged, like someone gasping for air through a panic attack. It was him. "Andrew," I said, my voice tight. He didn't respond right away, just more of that desperate, trembling breath. I hit the speaker button, and the room went still as we all leaned in, listening. Then, finally, his voice broke through, soft,
trembling, barely a whisper, but terrified. It was Andrew, and he was whispering fast, frantic, most of it a blur of incomprehensible words, but a few slipped through clearly enough to freeze the blood in our veins. It was that woman. We sat bolt upright. "Guys, you gotta get over here, right now." His voice was trembling, shaky, like he was trying not to cry, like every word was costing him something. We all started yelling into the phone, panicked now. "Where are you? Andrew, talk to us. What happened?" But he didn't respond. The line went completely silent. I could feel my whole body shaking, palms cold and slick with sweat. Something about that silence, it wasn't normal. It wasn't just a dropped call. It was waiting. We kept shouting his name. And then the silence broke. The sound of a door slamming open with violent force, like it had been kicked. And then came Andrew's scream. It was sharp, shrill, and completely unrestrained, a sound of raw animal panic. Not pain, not anger, pure terror. It echoed through the speaker, filled the room, filled us. That kind of scream doesn't leave you. It drills into you and stays there. And then the call ended, just like that. The silence that followed was worse than the scream. We sat there, paralyzed, still staring at the phone as if it would come back to life, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a joke. But nobody moved. And in that heavy silence, we all knew something had gone horribly, horribly wrong. We were completely freaking out. Adrenaline had slammed sobriety into us like a freight train. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911, struggling to speak clearly, my voice cracking every few words. I tried to remember the address, or even the name of the street. But my mind was blank. The night before had been a drunken blur, a twisted maze of neon lights and half-remembered turns. Nothing looked the same anymore. Nothing felt real. One of my friends, Derek, I think, insisted he remembered the route. He was sure of it. The police came to the hotel quickly. 2 patrol cars, lights off, sirens silent. No drama, just tension. One of the officers asked us to walk them through what happened. We did our best, everything we could remember. Then Derek stepped forward and told them he could lead the way. So we piled into the back seat of the trailing car. It was cramped, quiet, just the static hum of the police radio and the pounding in our chests. Derek guided them past the club, down narrow side roads that twisted through darker, quieter parts of the city. The buildings here were older, set back from the sidewalks. No signs, no music, just shadows. Finally, he pointed to a structure up ahead. "That's it," he said. The lead patrol car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers got out without a word and disappeared into the building's entrance. The rest of us waited in the second car. We were told to stay put. Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. I stared at the door the officers had entered, my leg bouncing uncontrollably. Every breath felt sharp, like it wasn't reaching deep enough. We sat in silence, too scared to speak, too horrified to imagine what they might find inside. Then the front door opened. One of the officers, a woman, stepped out. Her face was unreadable. She walked over to the car, calm, controlled. "I need one of you to come with me," she said. "We found a body. We need someone to confirm whether it's Andrew." Her words hit me like a brick wall. My vision went gray around the edges. I heard John curse and then break down sobbing. Jerry leaned forward, holding his face in his hands, repeating, "No, no," over and over like a broken prayer. They couldn't do it. So I did. I stepped out of the car, my legs barely holding me upright, and followed the officer across the lot. The building looked even worse up close. Not an apartment building at all. It was something else entirely. Something wrong. The paint was peeling. Windows shattered. The walls smelled of mildew and decay. It was more like an abandoned storage facility than anything residential. Dust clung to every surface. The silence inside was suffocating. She led me down a dark corridor. I tried not to look at the stains on the floor, at the half-broken doors, the flickering light overhead. Then I saw it. The body. It was slumped, half-spilled from an open closet, limbs limp, neck twisted at an unnatural angle. The mouth was open, slack, empty, and the eyes stared blankly upward toward the ceiling, a grotesque parody of peace. I nearly collapsed, but it wasn't Andrew. I knew immediately. This boy had blonde hair, soft, almost golden in the flickering light. Andrew's was pitch black. That one detail was all I needed to stop myself from spiraling. "It's not him," I whispered. "That's not Andrew." The officer didn't say anything at first. She nodded slowly, then stepped aside. They had already searched the entire place. No sign of anyone else. No movement, no clues. Just that single, horrible corpse in a forgotten room. Still clinging to hope, I walked to the closet. My chest felt tight, every breath sharp. I don't know what I expected to find, but I felt something, a gut pull. Like maybe Andrew had hidden in there, like maybe his phone would be there, something. But when I looked inside, nothing, no body, no blood, no phone, just a hollow space, just dust, just silence. We all tried our best to forget about it, tried to move on, tried to act like it hadn't happened, like Andrew hadn't screamed through a phone moments before vanishing into nothing. But it stayed with us, in the quiet moments,
in the background noise of everyday life. And just over a month later, it came crashing back. It was the middle of the night when my phone rang again. That familiar, hollow sound jolted me awake. I didn't even check the screen, just picked it up, heart already racing.
Bad reception. Static. No voice. Just faint, broken sounds on the line. The kind of interference that sends a chill down your spine for reasons you can't explain. I was about to hang up when a voice, weak, distant, barely audible, broke through. Jesse. My breath caught in my throat. Andrew, I shouted, sitting upright so fast the phone nearly slipped from my hand. But before anything else could be said, there was a sharp slam, a door, maybe, somewhere in the background. Then silence. The call ended. I called back immediately, once, twice, 5 times. No answer. Panic took over. I wasn't waiting around this time. I called the police, demanded they trace the number. And when they got back to me, the answer didn't make sense. The call didn't come from Nevada. It came from New Jersey, from our own town. A vacant house, only a few minutes away. They said they'd send a unit over to check it out, but that wasn't enough for me. Not even close. I grabbed my phone, dropped the address into GPS, and jumped in my car. My mind was a storm, heart thudding like a war drum. I floored it the entire 5-minute drive, ignoring every red light, every voice in my head telling me to stop. I had to see it for myself. The house stood on the corner, dark, empty, hunched over like it had been abandoned for years. Paint peeled from the siding, windows covered in grime. But something about it watched me. I parked across the street, engine still running. My hands trembled as I stepped out. I crept up to the front door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No movement, no breathing, no life. I circled around the back. That's when I found it. An open window, cracked just wide enough. I crouched below it and waited, listening. That's when I heard it. Soft, uneven creaks from the floorboards above, like the sound of slow, deliberate steps shifting weight on old wood. Faint snaps, groaning wood settling under someone's presence. Someone was up there. I knew it. I didn't even hesitate. I climbed through the window, landing quietly inside. The air was cold, stale, like it hadn't been touched in ages. I took one cautious step forward and froze. At the edge of the hallway, maybe 20 feet ahead, stood a figure. Not moving, not speaking, just standing there, facing me. But I couldn't see their face. It was shadowed, just out of reach of the moonlight slipping in through a cracked window behind them. All I could make out were two things. Bare, pale legs, so white they almost seemed to glow, and long, black hair cascading down past their shoulders. I didn't move. Neither did they. The silence between us stretched long and suffocating. I had come looking for Andrew, but I had no idea what I had just found. It was a woman. The figure in the hallway, the one standing motionless, staring straight at me, stepped slightly forward, and I saw it clearly then. It was a woman, but everything about her felt wrong. My stomach twisted into knots. Every instinct I had screamed that something terrible was about to happen. I braced myself, half expecting her to charge me full speed like some deranged specter out of a nightmare. But she didn't. Instead, she turned, without a word, without a sound, and bolted in the opposite direction. I stood frozen for a heartbeat. Then came the sound, a door slamming shut somewhere deeper in the house. Then footsteps, fast, heavy, rattling across the floorboards above me. And yelling. A man and a woman screaming at each other in frantic, muffled voices. Then, boom, 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 a second set of footsteps, heavier, louder, coming down the stairs. Fast. That was all I needed. I turned and ran, no second thoughts, no hesitation. I leapt out the same window I had entered through and dove straight into a thick bush in the backyard, leaves and branches scratching my arms as I tucked myself low. Not even 5 seconds later, someone stepped out onto the porch behind the house. I held my breath. But for the first time in months, maybe longer, luck was finally on my side. A police car came rolling up to the curb, red and blue lights flashing, siren giving one short burst before going silent. I stayed buried in the bush, watching through gaps in the leaves. The man on the porch muttered something, too low for me to catch, then slammed the door shut. But the police had already seen him. 2 officers jumped out and rushed to the front of the house. One of them twisted the doorknob and, to their surprise, it swung open. The idiot hadn't even locked it. I didn't move from my hiding spot. The last thing I wanted was to get mistaken for a suspect and wind up with a bullet in my chest. I kept low, my heart still hammering, and waited. After what felt like forever, one of the officers emerged from the house with a man in handcuffs. He looked dazed, angry maybe, disoriented. That's when I stepped out, cautiously, hands visible. I explained who I was, told them about Andrew, about the call, about the woman I'd seen inside. They listened, but when I told them there had been 2 people in that house, their expressions shifted, because they hadn't found her. They had searched the place, top to bottom, and the woman was gone completely. The only thing they noticed was that one of the upstairs bedroom windows had been left wide open. The curtains fluttered in the breeze. She had escaped. slipped out into the night before anyone could stop her, vanished like smoke, and just like that, she was gone. They found Andrew upstairs, locked inside a closet. He was barely recognizable. His skin was pale, sunken in places. His hair, long, matted, filthy, hung around his face like tangled vines. You could smell him before you even got near. A mix of sweat, grime, and something else, something sour, like fear left to rot. He was alive, but just barely. The police took him away immediately. Medics rushed him into the ambulance, voices sharp and urgent. We tried to follow, to get answers, but they waved us back. We just stood there, watching the flashing lights disappear down the street, knowing whatever nightmare Andrew had survived, we had only brushed the edges of it. Later, we learned more. The man who had been arrested, the one they found in the house, he wasn't married, had no known connection to anyone, no criminal record, no fingerprints in any database that led anywhere meaningful. And the woman? Gone, like she had never existed. The man claimed he had only just met her, said she wasn't his girlfriend, his wife, or even someone he really knew. Just a stranger, a presence, a whisper in the dark. Nothing made sense, and it still doesn't. Andrew eventually opened up to us, quietly, reluctantly. You could see the shame clinging to his words. He told us what they did. He said he was raped, beaten, hardly fed, held like an animal. I can't even imagine the strength it took for him to admit that out loud. But he did. He also told us something that chilled me to the core. The girl who had taken him from the Vegas sidewalk, the one with the flat voice and long black hair, she wasn't even part of the group running the place. She was just a collector. Her job was to escort him, deliver him, collect the payment. Payment for what? We still don't know. Andrew said they forced him to talk, forced him to give up information. Our hometown, our names, our addresses, everyone who had been with him that night. It explained why they were suddenly here in our town weeks later, why that call came from just down the street. But it didn't explain what they wanted. Why come all this way? To kill us? To take us? To add us to whatever sick, twisted operation they were running? We don't know. We still don't know. And the scariest part? We might never find out. I'm the only one Andrew ever told. Out of all our friends, I'm the only person who knows the full story. And whenever anyone else asked about what happened, I always gave the same answer. I don't know. Because honestly, how could I ever explain it? How do you make people understand something that doesn't even make sense to you? Things started to feel normal again. Not perfect, but normal. At least for a little while. Then, a few days later, I got a text. It was late, the kind of hour where even silence feels heavy. My phone buzzed once, just a short vibration. A message from an unknown number. Just one word. You. I stared at it for a long time. When I finally tried to respond, the message wouldn't go through. Blocked. Whoever it was had already cut off contact. So I blocked the number too, more out of instinct than anything else. Told myself it was probably just some random creep. But then it happened again, the next week. Then again, a month later. Always at night, always from a new number, always just a single word, or nothing at all. Sure, I had a gut feeling it was connected to that night, to them, to her. But I had no idea how far it would go. Until one night, something woke me. At first, I didn't even realize why I'd stirred. My room was quiet, still. But there was this faint glow behind my eyelids, a soft brightness that didn't belong. I opened my eyes and realized it wasn't sunlight. The porch light in the backyard was on, which made no sense. I never left it on. The light crept through the blinds, just enough to cast thin lines across my wall. I sat up slowly, heart already thudding. That kind of stillness when your body knows before your mind catches up. Then I saw it. A shadow. Movement, subtle, slow, right in front of the blinds. Somebody was out there, just standing, watching. I couldn't see clearly through the slats, so, holding my breath, I reached forward and nudged the bottom of the blind up, just an inch. That's when I saw them. Someone standing right there, inches from the glass, facing me, not moving, not speaking, just watching, like they had been waiting for me to look. But before I could even grab my phone, before I could even think, they were gone. Just gone. No footsteps, no sound. I'm sure of it. I know it was her. The same woman I saw in that house. The same one who vanished out that window. That same long black hair and pale skin burned into my memory like a scar. That was the last time. The last message, the last appearance, the last trace. And still, nothing about any of this has made a single ounce of sense. Even with everything Andrew told me, even with the things I saw with my own eyes, it feels like pieces of a puzzle that doesn't belong together. I won't bother telling you how Andrew's doing now, or how the rest of the group turned out. None of it's interesting. None of it matters. Because the only thing I can think about is this. If I ever see them again, any of them, I won't run. I'll be ready to call the police or take them on myself.